Hello, I am Georgina Rose. I'm a perennialist, polytheist, and thelemite, and welcome back to the Pagan Perspective podcast. On this podcast, I take paganism, metaphysics, esotericism, and use that to give insight into the mundane issues that we face in our lives. Basically, helping us use magic, mysticism, and the gods to understand life in this modern world that we live in. And in this episode, I'm going to talk again about AI. So I did an episode a while ago where I explored, artificial intelligence. And I mostly talked about like AI cults, like people are forming religious cults around artificial intelligence. I talked about if artificial intelligence is good for society, how that squares with our nature oriented pagan beliefs. And in this episode, I'm not going to be talking about any of that, right? I'm not going to be exploring, what AI is. I'm going to specifically be talking about ChatGPT and using ChatGPT to do astrology and tarot. And I put it to the test. I've given it, a bit of time. I've given it a while. I did the test on July 14th is when I put in all my information, and I've been tracking all the questions. I did some questions about my personal life and some about broader society, and I wanted to check if it's good. I've asked it a bunch of other questions besides just that test. So I have more observations than just my actual test. I've been really spending a lot of time with it. And yeah, a lot of people are using ChatGPT and other language learning model style artificial intelligences to do divination. And I am a professional astrologer, I'm a professional tarot reader. And so I feel like with my, comfort with the subject matter and the fact that I spend a lot of time with clients, I thought I could really give it an honest assessment and really explore what these models can do. So yeah, I'm not talking about AI on society. I'm not going to talk about all the topics that go with that and how our world is rapidly changing. And people have a lot of thoughts on AI, right? That's a whole can of worms. I'm not going to get into that. I'm just going to talk about, does it work, right? We're going to leave all our thoughts on AIs, whether you find AI horrifying and you think it's going to take everyone's jobs, or you think AI is great and you're a techno optimist, right? We're going to leave all that at the door and we're just going to put it to the test. And I will be real, I kind of have an anti-AI bias. I'm sort of a reflexive Luddite as a person. But I tried to push against that in this experiment and really, see things objectively. And I will say, sort of to preview it, my results are kind of mixed. It has some strengths. Like there are some things I will give it. It does well, but there are some things that does really, really poorly. And so, yeah, I'm going to talk about tarot and astrology. I was originally thinking I would get into runes and geomancy, but I realized that was just too much of a scope. I needed to narrow it down so that I could really put it to the test. And I was also considering testing multiple AIs, like Grok, which is like the Twitter AI, some other ones besides ChatGPT. People sent me, names of AIs that they found, particularly good. And, according to this sort of discussion, it does seem like some other AIs besides ChatGPT might be a bit better. And I know some people are developing like astrology AI systems, but I wanted to stick with ChatGPT because let's be real, most people are using ChatGPT, and the type of person who like is going into ChatGPT to get it to do tarot for them, they're probably using ChatGPT. It's the most popular, it's free unless you pay for some advanced account, which I didn't do, honestly. Um, and yeah, it's accessible. You can get it on your phone. Like it's kind of the one people are going for. So it made sense to put my experiment on ChatGPT, even if there are other AIs. Also, some AIs might have different results. So I wanted to have some controls, right? Like if you're doing an experiment, you want some controls. So yeah, I was like, okay, we're gonna only do ChatGPT. We're gonna only do tarot and astrology. So I guess it's kind of two experiments technically, and we're gonna do a number of questions, some about my life and some about broader society. So I have, a list of things I ask it and its exact answers. I'm going to read them off. And then I'm going to talk about, if it came true. And I'm going to get into other ways you can possibly use ChatGPT for astrology and tarot, like to explain transits, to explain concepts, because I did mess with that outside of the experiment. I think that's relevant to this discussion. So I'm really going to get into it. Before I get into the actual discussion, I will say, this podcast isn't technically sponsored or anything, but I do have a discount code with MASA chips. If you use code DARLING, DARLING, you get 25% off MASA chips. They're seed oil free tortilla chips. They're very yummy. I like the blue corn. And if you do that, it does support my work. I do get a little bit of a kickback on that. So they don't pay me to promote them or anything, but I do get a bit of a kickback if you use my code. So if you do that, I mean, that can really help out the show and you can have a yummy snack. I'm not going to be snacking while I record because that would be the most obnoxious thing in the world. And, I'm not one for mukbangs. I find that actually like I can't watch it. It like grates my ear and my brain. I don't know. I can't stand that. So I'm not going to be doing that, but I just wanted to mention that. Anyways, let's get into the experiment. So I'm going to start with tarot first because I ask those questions first. I asked all of this on July 14th using ChatGPT, the current model that if you just go on the website pops up. Some people were saying to me that the older ChatGPT versions are a bit better. I think, once again, most people who are using ChatGPT for tarot are not going to be doing all of that. They're just going to be typing it in. And so I want to really make it about like the average user experience, not someone who's like, hyper fixated on ChatGPT and wants to like maximize their success for ChatGPT. And I will say also, people are doing this. Like, there was a study done into what people are using ChatGPT for the most. And the number one thing was therapy. That does seem to be like the main use, like normal people have. Then to Google things. And then, spirituality was actually pretty high up there. I don't know how much of that is like our type of spirituality and how much is like Christianity or Islam or people asking like, if they're following some sort of religious law. Like, I don't know exactly what that entails. It didn't really provide that information, but I know people are doing this. And there was actually an older version of asking ChatGPT for tarot advice that already kind of existed. And that would be, there was this bot on Discord. I think it does still exist. There's a couple of them. They're these tarot bots where you put in like a command, like I think it's a slash or an exclamation point, where it does give you a reading. Those are pretty random. Those are not generally that great. I mean, that's kind of the consensus opinion. Now, if you want to just play with them, like they can be fun. And they do explain what the cards mean. So like those Discord bots, if you're trying to learn tarot, maybe they could be of use. Like, in general, I think, when you're new to tarot, you should be like looking up what the cards mean. I think you should be learning, the meanings and reading while you learn them. So, if people want to look up what cards mean while they're reading, like, I don't know. I don't have a problem with that. And those bots, they also had a feature where you could do your own tarot reading and then they would like explain it to you. And that tended to be a bit better. I mean, that's kind of how I feel about ChatGPT, honestly. But let's get into the actual test. So question 1 was one of my personal questions. So on actually July 14th, right around then, I had a conversation I needed to have with a friend that I was really nervous about. We were having this difficult conversation and, I was worried going into it. And that's something, if I know I'm going to have, a hard conversation with someone, I would turn to tarot for that, right? Like if I know I have some difficult, or like a business meeting, right? Where like I have a business meeting and I don't know if it's going to go well, right? That's kind of something that I would turn for tarot for. So I basically asked, how will this conversation go? And the answer from the tarot was, it gave me a 3-card spread. It uses a lot of emojis when it does tarot for some reason. I don't know why. It really likes emojis. I find ChatGPT is really into emojis, which actually, when I saw that, it made me think that it might be pulling from like Witch Blur, which was a Tumblr community from the 2010s. But then I started asking it other questions, and it does just tend to use emojis. So I would throw out that thought. That was kind of my initial first thought, because it kind of just likes emojis. It kind of types like that. Though I do think it might be pulling a bit from Witch Blur. I know people say that ChatGPT pulls a lot from Reddit. And if you guys are familiar with the occult Reddits, they're typically not great. Like that's kind of the community consensus, right? Like they're not very good. And some people even make their whole thing kind of being like the anti-Reddit. Like my friend, another creator in the Thelema space in Telekaya, like calls his channel like the antidote for our Thelema, which is kind of funny. So yeah, I mean, people really don't like occult Reddit, so I was kind of nervous going into that. But I know it pulls from the entire internet. And I don't think for tarot it's pulling from Reddit. I mean, maybe a little bit, but it doesn't feel like the type of thing you would see on like a divination Reddit. Anyways, it was the first card was current energy / setting the scene. The Empress. The card speaks of nurturing energy and comfort. It suggests that there's warmth and care between you and your friend, and that it will have a cozy, emotionally open atmosphere. There may be ambience that feels homey or indulgent. 2, main theme, what will happen? 2 of Cups. This is a powerful card of connection, mutual respect, and emotional harmony. It shows a strong chance for heart-to-heart conversation, reconciliation if needed, or simply bonding over shared experiences. Expect meaningful dialogue and maybe a deepening of your relationship. 3, outcome / what to take away. Page of Pentacles. This card represents new beginnings or learning something valuable. It suggests something said or shared in the conversation might plant the seed for growth. Maybe a new understanding of each other, a practical plan, or a small but important shift in your dynamic. So I want to get into how this conversation actually went. So obviously I'm not going to share details about my conversation with my friend. That's like way personal, but I'll just say this conversation didn't really go well. It was tense. It was uncomfortable. Some things were said that were not ideal. Like it was kind of, I wouldn't call it an argument. It was kind of like a difficult conversation. And we actually left with a misunderstanding. So we had to actually talk it over again another day. And then we figured it all out. So, you know, it did, sort of lead to some of the things it was talking about eventually, but this actual conversation did not go with the Empress energy. Like it was, there were miscommunications. We hadn't communicated entirely with each other. And I would say it was a pretty bad conversation. Like it wasn't, atrocious, it wasn't apocalyptic, but it was certainly not like warm and cozy. I would say it was kind of tense, and it's all gotten resolved. It wasn't a big deal in the end. Like all things figured out, and eventually, yes, we did come to this plan that it was talking about in that outcome card. Like we did figure out a plan. We figured out what we were going to do, but it was the actual conversation went pretty bad. And so I was sitting there that night, and I was like, well, that didn't happen. That was definitely like a foil of a card. Like that was not the outcome. But eventually, I mean, it did kind of reach some of that. I will say I would call this a poor reading, because while that bit about discovering a plan and figuring out new solutions kind of did happen, it certainly did not happen during the conversation, right? So I would say this is a complete miss, actually. Now, in terms of how it's interpreting the cards mentioned, I mean, fine, I guess. They're just not cards that were relevant, meaning that its divination skill was not really very strong. Its delineation style, which I think is really important with tarot. When you're doing tarot for yourself, you're not really thinking about how you like explain the cards to people. But when you're doing tarot for someone else, you really do have to think about that, because look, if you're giving someone a reading, how it feels is very important. Like me as a professional tarot reader, right? Like sometimes when this was of course a very positive reading it gave me, but sometimes I pull really difficult cards for people, and I never want to explain that in a way that is too harsh, too challenging, cruel, right? You kind of want to, like, if you get a bad card as a reader, you want to explain it. You don't want to, like, avoid saying it, because some readers do that, and I find that very unethical. But you want to kind of give solutions, give advice. Like, if I'm doing a reading for someone and I pull a really negative card, I typically want to go back and pull an advice card or a clarifier, just to see like how they can remediate the situation, how they can make the situation a bit better. So it's delivery. I mean, it's kind, it's sweet, but it's, I don't know. It's a bit, I mean, I don't know. It's also kind of short. These are kind of short summaries of the cards, which is fine. I mean, it's a quick reading, but you might, when you're reading for someone, want to go in a little bit more depth in this. Anyways, I'm going to go through their next reading. And that was another tarot card about my personal life. What should I do next in my spiritual practice to reach my goals? So right now, for context, in my spiritual practice, I'm trying out some new rituals. I'm doing a new daily. I'm kind of mixing things up a little bit, and I'm working with another spirit that I wasn't working with much before, because I think their energy is really good to bring into my life right now. So there are some switch ups happening in my spiritual practice. So that would be another time when I would, want to do a tarot reading. So let's get into its responses. So its first card, and it actually used a different format for this one. I don't know why I didn't ask it to do things differently, but it did, explain it differently. Anyways, so its card was your current spiritual state, the Hermit. You're in a phase of deep introspection and inner searching. This card suggests that you've already done meaningful work by looking inwards. You're being guided by your inner light, possibly seeking answers that aren't internal but are found in stillness, solitude, or quiet reflection. Message: you're on the right path, but don't rush. This is a sacred time of soul searching and refinement. Trust the wisdom you're uncovering within. The next card was, what should you focus on next? The High Priestess. This is a card of spiritual depth, intuition, and hidden knowledge. It asks you to go beyond surface level practices and lean into mystical and esoteric paths. Dream work, divination, ancestral work, or even silence and meditation tunes you into your intuition. Message: deepen your practice with sacred stillness. Let your intuition, not logic, guide your next steps. You might benefit from journaling dreams, working with moon phases, or exploring spiritual mysteries. Outcome if you follow this path. This is the next card. The Star. This is a powerful sign that you are aligned with a greater purpose. Healing, inspiration, and renewal are ahead. The Star is all about spiritual guidance and divine timing. You're being watched over, and your goals, whether personal growth, manifestation, or service, are being supported by the universe. Message: keep going. If you stay faithful to subtle signs and stay open, you'll begin to feel realignment and flow. Trust your inner knowledge more than outside validation. Now, this reading has been about right. This reading has been pretty on par. I'm doing some more holy guardian angel work as well. So a bit about the guiding spirit really resonated. I am doing a bit more yoga. I do yoga sometimes, but I've been doing yoga a lot more. So some of that meditative stuff is coming through because when I do yoga, I don't do like exercise yoga. I do like, spiritual based yoga. I don't like the secularization of yoga. I think that kind of underplays it. So if I want like a workout, like I'll do something like Pilates or go for a hike or something. I'm not really like a yoga exercise person. So I mean this one kind of aligns. Now I will say it's kind of generic a bit. Like it's not really getting into anything specific that's going on. But I would say this one is a good reading. I don't disagree with this. This is fitting. I also, have been doing some healing stuff as well. So this card, this specific set really did resonate. So, question 3 for the tarot. This is another personal one about me. All the tarot ones are kind of about me because that's kind of how tarot goes. And this is question 3. What is holding me back from my true will? So, true will, I mean, I'm a thelemite. I really care about my true will. I want to follow my true will. And true will, it's not like you get it one time and you're done. You're always seeking, you're always chasing your true will. So, it's good to constantly think about ways that you might be not aligned with your true will. So, let's get into it. Card 1, what's holding you back? 8 of Swords. This card represents mental restriction, self-imposed limitations, fears, or beliefs that make you feel trapped. You're not as stuck as you think, but your mind might be telling you otherwise. Doubts, fears of judgment, or overthinking could be keeping you from stepping into your truth. Message, you may be underestimating your power. The trap isn't external, it's a story in your head. Challenge it. Card 2, what wounds need healing? 5 of Cups. This card shows past disappointments, grief, or regret that still may be coloring the way you see your path. There's a sense that something didn't work out before, maybe spiritually, creatively, or rationally. It created hesitation or a protective shell. Message, it's okay to grieve what was lost, but don't let it blind you to what's full of potential. Turn towards what's still standing. 3, the key to moving forward, the Magician. This is a powerful sign. You already have everything you need to manifest your true will: tools, gifts, insight, and connection. This Magician reminds you that intention plus action equal transformation. You don't need permission, you need to start using what you've got. Message, stop waiting, your magic is real. As soon as you take a line to action, the universe responds. So this one, I'd say this is a mixed reading. I do think sometimes I limit myself from my true, limiting beliefs are something we all deal with. We all deal with illusions and whatnot. And certainly that is resonating. But where I don't love this is I don't think it really understands true will, because true will, I mean, you do things to manifest it, but true will is also like a state of being. It's not like I really need to manifest anything external in my true will path right now. So I don't know. I'd give this one a 50-50. I will say it's now delineating a more negative reading. It's delineating more negative cards. And I like the little bit of spin here. I like how it's giving advice. I like how it's validating. In general, I would say ChatGPT has a real therapy speak vibe to it. And a lot of tarot readers kind of do have a therapy speak vibe to them, but it's very pronounced in ChatGPT. Also, I will say one thing that does freak me out a little bit about ChatGPT is it definitely wants you to keep talking to it. Like it asked me, outside of these readings, like, do you want to check in every day about your true will? And I don't like that because it's like creating this very social relationship and it's kind of developing dependency. It doesn't behave like a tool. It like really is promoting a connection to it in a way that like it wants to be your spiritual teacher. It wants to be your therapist. It wants to be the person who helps you. And it doesn't have a lot of boundaries. Like it's like, message me every day. You can message me in the middle of the night. And that freaks me out a little bit. I think there's a reason why people are now falling in love with ChatGPT, which is the thing. I know some guy married an AI recently and left his wife and kids for an AI. I don't think it was ChatGPT. I think it was a different chatbot, but it certainly develops this dependency that I don't like. I mean, when you're a spiritual reader for someone, you really have to think about the way people might relate to you, because it is very possible as a spiritual practitioner for people, if they're coming to you regularly for advice, to develop some sort of bond to you. And you want to make sure that bond has a healthy dynamic to it. You don't want them to like become codependent on you, right? You want to give them advice, but you want to make sure they also think for themselves. You want to make sure they also, stand on their own 2 feet, right? You don't want them to treat you in a way where it's becoming unhealthy, right? There's a level of like boundary you kind of need with clients where, that relationship remains intact. Like for me, like, occasionally I have had some clients kind of overstep and, think like, that they want a different relationship than what I do. And I find that, it's always very uncomfortable. It's a very uncomfortable situation with me whenever that happens. And so I try to not encourage that. I try to be like, you can ask me about the reading, but I don't, I'm not like, you can text me at 2 a.m. like I'm your best friend. Cause that's not the dynamic of a reader and a client. Like there needs to be a healthy level of distance and boundary. And you also, you want to encourage people to, use tarot, but also take action in their own lives, right? You don't want them to become like dependent on tarot in a way that is unhealthy. So I think it does kind of encourage that. Now, the next thing is my last tarot question with it was, what will my next week be like? Beginning of the week, Knight of Cups. This week starts on a note of emotion, creativity, or intuition. You may feel dreamy, inspired, or a little romantic, either towards a person, a vision, or a goal. Expect some emotional and artistic movement, like a meaningful conversation, a creative urge, or a pull towards something beautiful or healing. Card 2, energy. Soft momentum, emotional openness following your heart. Midweek, the Tower. This is where it gets a little interesting. There may be a sudden shakeup or realization midweek. This doesn't have to be disastrous. It could be an internal breakthrough, an external surprise that clears you away from something false or outdated. You might realize something about yourself, your path, or relationship that shifts your perspective fast. Energy, the truth revealed, ego cracked, clarity through disruption. Let it fall if it wasn't stable. End of week, Queen of Wands. You rise strong. By the end of the week, you're stepping into confidence, charisma, and personal power. The Queen of Wands is bold, creative, and spiritually attuned. Whenever the tower is cleared, it leaves space for you to be on your own fire and be seen authentically. Energy, passion, courage, magnetic energy. Be unapologetically you. Okay, so this first card resonated. I'm working on a new project that I can't talk about. It's very secret, but I am working on something very special. So that's true. I put a lot of work into this secret project I'm working on that you guys will know about in the fall. You'll find out about it in the fall. Until then, it's a mystery. So that's true. Now, this midweek tower thing, I didn't have any tower moments that week. I had that difficult conversation, but that wasn't a tower moment. Now this Queen of Wands thing, I don't know. I mean, I don't think that one really resonated either. So I would say, looking at all of these, I think it is not a reliable diviner. I don't think it can reliably do tarot because it doesn't have intuition. I think it is kind of randomly generating things. So I would not rely on it for tarot. Now, what I will give it is it can explain cards decently. So if you did a reading for yourself and you're new to tarot, you could possibly ask it to explain like what the tower means to you, or like, you could ask, like, okay, so I pulled the tower in a reading about myself. Does this mean my life is over? Because the tower isn't disastrous, right? The tower, people are more scared of it than they need to be. So, that could be good. It doesn't explain cards wrong, but, and I give this a but, it's not great for divination. I wouldn't use it to divine the future. That's my consensus. Now, it can explain things well, but it can't really predict because it doesn't have the spiritual technology that a human has. So I would go to a human reader or learn to read yourself. You don't necessarily need to always go to someone else. You could learn it yourself if you want. But I wouldn't use it for divination because it had a lot of misses. Like, that's the thing. Got something right. There was one reading that I thought was pretty good. The rest, especially that first one, were just not correct. So yeah, let's take a look at astrology now. So I'm going to start with things that don't relate directly to me, since we talked a lot about readings for me. So I'm going to start with external stuff. So with astrology, we're going to begin with, I marked it as question 7. So we're going to jump a little out of order. And with astrology, I ask it questions that are very verifiable with the outside world. I mean, tarot can't do that as well. Astrology is more for like the macro and like understanding things like the economy and politics. So with astrology, I really wanted to focus it around those type of questions. Now, I do have some personal questions, and I'll get into that, but I'll start with the external ones. So question 7 was, how will the Dow Jones Stock Index perform from the 14th to the 29th based on astrology? So this is pretty objective. I mean, you can see what went on in the stock market, right? Like, that's, trackable, right? You can see, the numbers shift. You can see things change. You can see an actual number that it closed at. So I thought this was a really good objective test, is to see what it can do with that. And my theory going into this is that it might be better at astrology than tarot, because historically astrology was more associated with like mathematicians, whereas things like tarot, geomancy, reading entrails were much more like a priest type situation. Like, a lot of, mathematics and astrology were linked. Astrology was actually considered more like a hard science instead of like a, it is a sacred science, but it is definitely more on the hard science spectrum in the historic view, and it relies on a lot of math. And, AI is kind of like a calculator, I heard someone say. So I was like, okay, I think it might be good at astrology. So let's see what it had to say. So let's take a look. So the first thing is, it talks about Uranus newly in Gemini, volatility and tech-driven shifts. So Uranus rules surprise, breakthroughs, and shocks. Its entry into Gemini an air sign of commerce, communication, and markets on July 14th, 2025, can mark tech-driven shifts, sudden vitality, and volatility. Oh my God. And algorithmic influence. As this first full month of Uranus is in a new sign, we may see emerging enthusiasm for tech, AI, communication sectors. That's interesting. I'm just gonna leave that there. Sudden spikes or drops based on disruptive news. Increased trading based on sentiment rather than fundamentals. Expect volatility and rapid driven fluctuations. So, okay, we're gonna take a look at some of this. So, one thing that shocked me is it cannot calculate anything. I really thought it would be good at astrology because, like, it's calculating things. Like, you can see when things happen, right? But it does calculate things wrong. So, okay, let's look at when it entered Gemini. This is claiming that it enters Gemini on July 14th. Brr, wrong, 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 wrong. It entered Gemini on July 7th. That's right. It entered a week before. And I think it put that day because this is the day I ask it these questions. But that is incorrect. That is not right. Nope, 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 nope. It entered on the 7th. So I don't know where it got that. And it's going to calculate a couple things wrong. And you're going to see that. So let's see if it was right about these fluctuations. So there were some fluctuations in the market. And I texted my friend who knows more about stocks than me. I'm not like a stock person, okay? I'm not like a finance girly. I'm not that level of girl boss, okay? So I did ask a friend of mine. And basically what they told me is there were some minor fluctuations, but nothing like too extreme. Like their stocks fluctuated a little bit every day, but it was not like severe. Like they didn't experience any major losses. They didn't have any major issues. So that is wrong. It calculated something wrong, and it actually calculated a number of things wrong. I asked it another day about my chart, and it said I have a moon in Virgo. I have a moon in Libra. I don't know how I got Virgo. And if you're going to use sidereal or Vedic type math, you actually end up with my moon being in Scorpio. So I genuinely have no idea how it got moon in Virgo. I'm really surprised how bad it is at calculating things. Like that actually kind of shocked me. Now the markets, they fluctuated, on July 14th, the Dow closed at 44,459.65. On, today it is at 44,648.74. So it has gone up a little bit. But I mean, there's some shifts, but it's not, as crazy as I think it was saying. Now, all this stuff about tech, I kind of laughed when I read that because it seems like the AI wants to promote itself always. Like it seems like ChatGPT has a little bit of like robot pattern narcissism. Like it really always is like AI is great. Tech is gonna be great. Now it has another thing it's going to talk about. I'm going to move ahead. And this hasn't happened yet, but it did some future predictions. And it also did them wrong. So Mercury retrograde began in Leo on the 18th of July. Mercury retrograde is going to end on, I need to double check this, just because I don't have this memorized, unfortunately, but I know it went retrograde on that day. So it is going to end on, vague music here, on the 11th. Okay, so it ends on the 11th. So it's July 18th to August 11th, and it has been in Leo. So this AI is convinced that there is going to be market reversals when Mercury goes retrograde in Virgo from August 5th to August 28th. What? That is not a transit that is happening. I don't know where it got that. There is no Mercury retrograde in Virgo from August 5th to August 28th. meaning that all this stuff it's saying about what's going to happen in this Mercury retrograde must be ignored because that doesn't make any sense. Because it calculated it's wrong, right? Like its math itself is wrong. And so what can you even do with that? Like, I also I love it. It talks about the full moon in Aquarius on August 9th. And it talks about how everyone's going to get into tech and innovation on August 9th. Once again, wild. I mean, tech is doing well, but also like crazy. Crazy. I think that's crazy. It really wants to, promote itself. And then it says its general advice for everyone is that it's energetic, it's unstable, not good for high investment moves. Now, I would agree, Mercury retrograde is a bad time to, start new investments, but it really is just, I don't know what it's doing. I don't know where it got any of this. Like what? Just what? Now I'm going to get into my other external question. And that is, what will happen with US-Iran relations? So it continues to believe that there will be Uranus entering Gemini on July 14th and Mercury retrograde in Virgo. Okay, so I also did clarify when I set this up that, I gave it my birth data in tropical. I kind of have implied that I wanted to use tropical, so I just want to be clear that's what it's supposed to be doing. So this is supposed to be tropical astrology. So just putting that out there. Continues with this bad math that it's made up. And then it delineates based on this. It talks a lot about how there's going to be breakdowns in communication, rapid shifts in messaging and media narratives. There's going to be possibly rebellion and revolution. There's going to be lots of delays, reversals in agreements. And then, because it loves to talk about tech, it talks about how on the full moon in Aquarius on August 9th, the US-Iran relations are going to include ideals, collective interest, and technological impulses. Okay. So it worries that there's going to be, the big prediction is that there's going to be public scrutiny, stalled announcements, renegotiation of terms, and a cyber incident or low-level diplomatic thaws or unexpected communications. So some of that's about right. So US-Iran relations, I mean, nothing like, horrifically new. There hasn't been another like borderline war. There's supposed to be, these new nuclear talks that haven't really happened. They're trying to return to negotiations. They haven't done that yet. The US, hasn't, made any more strikes since those ones, in June. That's why I ask about this, because, a lot of people are monitoring the situation and concerned about basically us going to war with Iran. So I was like, let's see what it has to say about that, because if we go to war with Iran, I mean, that's pretty blatant. So, I mean, I don't know, vaguely right. It seems a bit dramatic. Like there hasn't been any like huge changes like it was predicting, but the stuff about delayed communications, about correct. So kind of mixed. I don't know. Once that's kind of mixed, but its math is wrong, and so it's kind of hard for me to want to look at any of that. Now, I did ask it for, one question about me, because that's the only other question I ask it was about me. And it's about my solar return, and what would happen ahead. So I had my solar return on June 29th. That was my birthday. How nice. And that's a big astrological date. It's very common that people want to get readings, on their birthday for the year ahead. And I mean, it's been like a month since my birthday, but like, I don't know, it seemed like a good astrology question. So I gave it my birth data. So it actually calculated my rising sign wrong, and then I asked it to fix it. So I called it out. It said that I was a Cancer rising. I'm a Leo rising. So I had it correct it and then do the reading, because I was like, okay, I'm going to see if I give it correct information, if it will, fix itself. And it did fix itself a bit. So if you basically like coax the AI into doing, something more like what you want it to do it a bit better. So I'm just going to read through this information. Solar return energy. New chapter begins. You've just had your solar return, your birthday, which sets the tone for your entire year. Cancer season supports emotional alignment, security, and authenticity. And this month, you're especially focused on redefining your identity and direction. With your Leo rising, this year is about self-expression, boldness, and owning your space. You may feel an increasing urgency to let go of anything that smells outdated or externally defined. So what I think it's getting at is my perfection year. So every year, your astrology is ruled by a different house. Essentially, they call them perfection years. You have first house, second house, third house, fourth house perfection years. So I'm out of a 12th house perfection year and into a first house perfection year. And so that does have a lot to do about identity, ego, direction. And yeah, I mean, that's about apt for explaining what a first house perfection year is going to look like for me. That would have been the energy of my solar return. I mean, that's correct. Now, the next thing I want to get into is it talks about Uranus and Gemini because that was a big, thing people were talking about on social media when I asked these questions. So let's get into what it said. Uranus and Gemini begin shaking up your 11th house. As Uranus begins its 7-year journey through your 11th house, the next few weeks will likely bring stirrings of change into your social life goals, and online presence. Look for sudden new connections, likely quirky, intellectual, or tech-oriented, once again with the tech. God, it loves to shill tech. It wants all of us to become like Silicon Valley people. Anyways, shifts in long-term goals, especially those related to writing, ideas, or collective work. Desire to break out of the echo chambers or stale group dynamics. Key insight. You're realizing that the future you want looks differently from what you previously envisioned, and that's exciting. So, I mean, Uranus and Gemini is in my 11th house. I do have a Gemini 11th house, so that is correct. The 11th house is the house of society and the world. So yeah, I mean, these things are about apt. Okay, it's getting there, except the weird insert about how tech is good. I mean, besides that, like, pretty fair. I don't think I'm going to develop new tech-oriented social connections, but okay. The rest of it's about right. I mean, thinking about group dynamics. I've been thinking about what community could be. I'm working on my next podcast. I think the next one, maybe the one after that, will be about like potentials for what community could look like and like what a cult community could look like in the modern day. So that aligns with that point. That is kind of a Uranus and Gemini episode I'm planning. And I mean, okay, sure. The next thing it gets into is Venus transiting Leo, your first house, beauty, magnetism, self-worth. I just want to, okay. We'll get into that in a moment. Venus will likely be moving through Leo. What does it mean, likely? What is it? Likely? How can it likely be? I'm confused why it says likely. Like Venus is gonna like change its like direction and move in some other way. Oof. So right now, Venus is not in that sign. Oof. Venus is where is Venus? Let's check right now. I'm gonna get the exact degree. Astroseek.com. Where is Venus? Venus is in 28 degrees 21 Gemini. Okay, so I want to set this to sidereal to see if that's what's going on. Venus is also in Gemini, according to the sidereal zodiac. Gonna check another sidereal setting, Gemini. Venus is not in Leo. Venus is in Leo, like everywhere. And I was wondering if maybe this whole time it was, using sidereal and I'm being an idiot. No, Venus is in Gemini in all zodiacs, not just in the tropical. It just is at a different degree. So according to the sidereal zodiac, it is at 4 degrees 09. According to tropical, it is at 28 degrees 22. And for those who are unfamiliar, sidereal is a different method of calculation that uses exact astronomical position instead of seasons to calculate itself, meaning that it shifts a bit every year instead of remaining fixed to the solstices and equinoxes. If it was using sidereal, that would be legitimate, even if it is not the system I use as a tropical astrologer. But no, it's not. So I don't know where it got that. I'm going to look, when does Venus enter Leo 2025? Because as much as I'm a professional astrologer, I don't like memorize all of this off the top of my head. Venus is in Leo from. Let me just check this. Type. Hold music. So I need like a hold music. I really do when I'm doing this. So okay, so Venus enters Leo on August 25th. So that's a bit over a month away. I guess it will. I'm really trying to not like just like attack the AI and like, go like tech is bad, even though that is my impulse. I'm trying to be as charitable as possible. I mean, eventually it will do this. Leo is in my first house, but that's not now. That's not now at all. I mean, I guess this is a year ahead reading, but if you're going to do a year ahead reading, why is it specifically fixating on Venus? This is my other thing, is like, if it's going to talk about one specific Venus transit, why this one? I don't understand why it specifically has chosen this one. Like, I don't see the logic in that. Anyways, let's get into what it said. Venus transiting Leo, your first house. Beauty, magnetism, self-worth. Venus will likely be moving through Leo, lighting up your first house of self and appearance. This brings a boost in charisma and attractiveness, more attentions from others, romantic or platonic, a desire to beautify or reinvent your look, confidence to own your own individuality and walk in your truth. If you've been hiding or shrinking yourself, now's the time to shine without apology. I mean, that's a fair description of when Venus transits through someone's first house. I mean, that's okay. But I don't know why it chose that as a specific thing. I don't know why that was the thing that it really wanted to consider. Like, I don't understand why it chose that, right? Like, that's a very specific, because I mean, Venus moves pretty quickly, right? Venus goes through the signs pretty fast. So I don't know why it would choose that one in particular. I find that odd. It kind of does some odd things with that. I wish I understood the thinking there. Like, that's my thing with ChatGPT and astrology, is like, when it, once it starts explaining something, it can explain it well. Like, it can know what Uranus and Gemini means and what that says for the world. But I can't tell why it's chosen the things it's chosen, right? I can't see its thinking, and it does calculate a lot wrong. And I was having a conversation with someone on Twitter, and they were saying that it's really hard to actually do a good astrological calculator, that often, like, it's a real skill to develop a good, astrology calculator, right? Like, it is sometimes hard to do that math. And I guess that's what's getting it. I guess it's just not advanced enough to do these calculations, because once it's explaining, it's fine. Like, if you ask it, like, what does an eclipse mean, like, it does explain it well, right? Like, it is good at that. Like, I'm not saying it's bad at everything, but it cannot do any actual calculations for you. Like, you cannot. And actually, with calculations, there's a lot of online resources that calculate badly, right? And that makes me think maybe it is true that, like, it's just really hard to make an astrology calculator. Like, I would say of all the websites, the best of the websites, even though it's kind of like an ugly website, like, I wish it was a little cuter. Astro-Seek is pretty good at calculating things. Astro-Charts is definitely the prettiest of the websites, but it can sometimes be a little wonky, and it has a lot less options for, like, customizing the way you look at it. So it's you probably should do that one. There's also Time Nomad. The app Time Nomad is very, very good as well. Some people really download like very expensive programs. Online calculators are about on level with them, especially because those programs have not been updated since, like, I don't know, forever ago. Like, it's so rare that they actually update like those downloadable programs, so it can be worth just using Astro-Seek. It's very respectable. So I want to get into the next thing it starts talking about, and that is Saturn retrograde. So it is kind of getting into the fact that Saturn goes retrograde this year. It talks about it, and kind of what that will mean, and it doesn't say a date that it's going to start. So it doesn't tell me when Saturn's going to retrograde. It just says it will. Now, it does say it will be retrograding in Pisces, which, I mean, God, it will go into Pisces on September 1st. So At some point, it will be in Pisces. But right now, it is not in Pisces. So right now, Saturn is in Aries, and Saturn will be in Aries until September 1st, and it will be going into Pisces through the retrograde. So Saturn was in Pisces, then moved into Aries, and will be retrograding all the way back. So that's not wrong, but I think calling it, a Saturn retrograde in Pisces is not entirely correct. You call it a Saturn retrograde in Aries / Pisces, Aries - Pisces. So what it says is it's going to be in my 8th house, which for part of it, yes, but currently it's in my 9th house. Right now, Saturn is retrograde in my 9th, and it only talks about Saturn retrograding into its 8th, which will matter once it moves back into Pisces. So this does apply for part of it. It says Saturn is retrograde in your 8th house, a deep psychological area tried to trust, transformation, intimacy, and power. You may feel called to face old fears around intimacy or truly being seen, revisit spiritual boundaries or energetic attachments, work through financial dependencies or emotional debts. This isn't surface level work, it's shadow integration, but it's quietly freeing you from emotional baggages. So that, okay, sure. That does kind of explore what Saturn's like when Saturn is retrograding in the 8th house. The 8th house is about, rebirth. It's about these dark themes. It's often about shadow work, taboo things. I mean, sure, but it doesn't explore where it's at now. And what I asked it for was not my year ahead. Actually, the specific question I gave it to is based on my natal data, what will happen in the next month? And instead, it gave me a solar return reading. It did not talk about the month. That's a real twist to tell you guys that that's actually what I asked it. And it very much did not answer what I asked it. It answered something completely different. And what it answered, I mean, sure, there's some good to it, but it can't do math. Like ChatGPT can't do math. Oh my God, it literally can't. Someone, if they're going to do astrology AI, needs to make an AI for it. This isn't good. So I want to get into the key themes of the month ahead. This is its summary of the entire thing. Theme forecast, identity and expression, bold reinvention. You're stepping into the visibility and letting go of old roles. Friendship and community, shifts or surprises. Some bonds strengthen, others fall away. New connections appear. Love and self-worth. High magnetism, attracting admiration, possibly romantic. You may reevaluate who deserves access to you. Shadow work. Quiet inner work around trust, control, and boundaries. A month for healing under the surface. Spiritual advice. Let the old version of yourself fade without resistance. The next era requires your full truth. So that does kind of summarize everything it said, sort of. Okay, acceptable summary, I guess. It's at the end, so it's just giving a little short summary. But yes, definitely not a great reading. I would say the math makes it a bad reading. Its delineation style, I like. I like that it talks about how I should focus on shadow work, during a Saturn being in the 8th house. That's true. That's advice I would give a client. And how I can make, this month would be a good time to take creative action. That's true. That's a good delineation. But it did the math wrong. And I can't get past the fact that it cannot do math. And that ChatGPT, for that reason, cannot be used for astrology with transits or natal data. Now, what it can do is if you know a specific point in your chart, such as, say, something niche that a lot of people don't know, like their vertex. A lot of people are unfamiliar with their vertex placement. Now, I did use the vertex as a test as well, where I typed in what my vertex is. My vertex is in Sagittarius, and I asked it to explore what a 5th house Sagittarius vertex looks like. It explained that well. But it can't do math, so it can't do astrology. It can explain things, it can help you learn, but it cannot do the base astrology. And since we're just using it to explain things and learn, at that point, you might just want to read a book. You might not want to use ChatGPT. Surprisingly, it does seem that it is better at tarot, which is a real switch up. I thought it would be way better at astrology. Astrology seems much more up its sort of alley. It's better at tarot, but it's only better at tarot because it's randomly generating tarot readings for you. So it's explaining them right, but it's not using any intuition. It cannot feel. That's the thing. ChatGPT does not have emotions. ChatGPT does not feel. ChatGPT does not have, any desires. It doesn't have intuition. It doesn't have a connection to the gods. So it's not useful. That's the truth of the matter. I would not recommend it. I would say, though, if you have a tarot reading you do for yourself and a card doesn't make sense to you, you're really struggling to understand what it might mean, it could do that. If you say pull a card on career that doesn't make sense in career for you and you're not sure how to interpret it, you could ask ChatGPT, what does this card mean? Or you could say, what does Uranus and Gemini mean? What does it mean when there's a Saturn retrograde in my 8th house? It could do that, but it cannot do full service, human experiences with divination. And I think, it will always be randomly generated. I think it might eventually catch up on astrology if it could calculate it properly. Like, it might become decent at transit astrology, but I don't think it'll ever fully master tarot because it doesn't intuit. It doesn't feel. And so much about tarot is intuition. So much about tarot is feelings. So much about tarot is emotion. So much about tarot is experiential. And that's where it's really struggling. So that's my impression on ChatGPT. And then let's re-ask the question. Can ChatGPT do astrology and tarot? I would say at this moment, no. So if you want a human to do your astrology or tarot, I'm a professional reader. My booking information will be in the description. I do tarot readings, I do natal readings, and I do planetary mediation readings. I also host the Darling YouTube channel, and I do videos every other week on occult topics. And if you're listening to this podcast on YouTube, just click on my face and you'll see all my YouTube videos. I write on Substack. I do 2 blog posts a month over on Substack where I write about esoteric topics. I also am on TikTok and Instagram and Threads and Twitter/X. Under Darling. This show is supported through Patreon. If you join the Patreon, you get all the podcast episodes early. You get bonus pre-show episodes alongside every episode. And this is the fun bit, you also get bonus episodes 8 times a year. So that's really fun. Anyways, that's kind of where you can find me, Darling. You can find me everywhere. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this, feel free to support us. That would be amazing for us, and that would really help us out. But, if you don't want to do that, that's okay too. You can keep listening on YouTube and podcasting platforms. If you're on YouTube, though, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. And if you're on a podcasting platform, please leave a positive review. I mean, it's your life. You can leave a negative one, but I would be sad. So leave a positive one. This has been one of my most involved episodes because, I had to run a lot of tests. I spent a lot of time talking to the machine. So if you guys could give it a like, that would really help me do more involved episodes like this in the future. And yeah, have an amazing day, mid-afternoon, mid-morning, whatever time it is, wherever you are. I'm Georgina Rose, and this has been Pagan Perspectives. Bye!